Imagine this, it's Christmas Eve, your kitchen looks like a battleground, and your electric mixer just threw in the towel. Now picture the Amish calmly baking their iconic desserts, no gadgets, no stress, just pure holiday magic. How do they do it? Are they hiding some secret baking superpower? Here's the twist: while the rest of us juggle timers, gadgets, and chaotic kitchen moments, the Amish lean on age-old techniques passed down through generations. Think rolling pins that have seen more dough than your local bakery and recipes so old they could probably vote. In this video, we'll explore their unique baking process, discover how they create desserts that melt hearts and taste buds, and maybe even learn a thing or two about slowing down and enjoying the holiday season the Amish way. Grab your aprons, dust off that rolling pin, and get ready to step into a world where Christmas desserts are made the old-fashioned way, no Wi-Fi required. Introduction to Amish baking traditions. When it comes to Christmas, the Amish have a way of turning their kitchens into a magical workshop where flour, spices, and butter transform into masterpieces. But here's the kicker: they do it all without modern gadgets. No electric mixers humming in the background, no fancy timers, not even a single Google search for a recipe. Instead, they rely on the wisdom passed down through generations and a set of tools so simple they'd make your grandma's rolling pin look high-tech. Now, before we dive into the nuts and bolts, or should we say flour and sugar, of how they create their famous Christmas desserts, let's take a moment to appreciate the Amish philosophy. Their way of life revolves around simplicity, self-sufficiency, and community. It's not just about making desserts, it's about making memories, sharing stories, and keeping traditions alive. And that, my friends, is a recipe no modern appliance can replicate. The Amish baking traditions trace back to the 18th century when they first settled in America. Fun fact, their recipes have remained largely unchanged since then. Imagine whipping up cookies using a recipe older than electricity. Another tidbit: the Amish believe in working with their hands literally. Kneading dough isn't just a step, it's practically a form of meditation. Here's a relatable twist: imagine if your mixer broke down mid-Christmas prep. Panic, right? For the Amish, that's just another day in the kitchen. They've perfected the art of baking without a safety net, relying instead on intuition and a pinch of patience. Step 1. Preparing the ingredients. The first step in Amish Christmas baking is gathering the freshest ingredients. Forget supermarket runs or prepackaged shortcuts. Amish kitchens are stocked with locally sourced flour, freshly milled from nearby farms, homemade butter, creamy, rich, and churned by hand, molasses and spices imported during the 19th century and now staples in their desserts. Picture this: a young Amish boy running across a snowy field to fetch fresh milk from the barn while his grandmother starts grinding spices with a mortar and pestle. It's like a Hallmark movie, but better because it's real. Think of the Amish kitchen as the culinary version of a workshop in Santa's North Pole. Instead of elves with tech gadgets, you've got family members armed with wooden spoons and cast iron skillets. And the tools, let's just say they wouldn't look out of place in a museum. For instance, their hand-cranked mixer might remind you of a medieval torture device, but to the Amish, it's the ultimate multitasker. And that giant wooden bowl? It's been around longer than your great-aunt Edith. Here's where things get interesting. While you might measure ingredients by scooping them out of a store-bought bag, the Amish measure by feel and experience. It's like they've unlocked some secret baking superpower. But don't worry, this part of the process isn't out of reach for the rest of us. With a little mindfulness and maybe a sturdy rolling pin, you can channel your inner Amish baker. After all, the magic isn't in the tools, it's in the love and effort you pour into each step. Step 2. Mixing the ingredients the Amish way. With the ingredients gathered, the Amish begin the meticulous process of mixing. This isn't just tossing things into a bowl and letting a machine do the work. Oh no, this is a full body experience. Picture someone kneading dough with the intensity of a professional athlete warming up for a match. Their tools? A wooden spoon, a whisk, and an arm workout you'd normally pay for at the gym. Amish families believe in involving every member in this step. Even the youngest gets a turn stirring, though it might take 3 of them to handle the hefty wooden spoon. Here's a fun visual: imagine testing your hand-cranked mixer's speed by pretending it's a bicycle, pedal fast but steady, because one misstep and you're wearing the batter. These mixers, built to last centuries, are their pride and joy. Each crank is a connection to their heritage, and every turn infuses love into the dough. Did you know that the Amish don't rely on exact measurements? It's all about instinct. They'll tell you to add just enough flour until the dough feels right. For beginners, this might sound like black magic, but for them, it's second nature. Their secret weapon? A technique called folding, where the dough is carefully folded and pressed, creating the perfect texture. Watching an Amish baker fold dough is mesmerizing. It's a rhythm, a dance, and a testament to patience. Staple ingredients into edible works of art. No cookie cutters from Amazon here. They use handcrafted wooden molds passed down through generations. Take, for instance, their famous Christmas cookies. These aren't your standard circles or stars. They're intricately designed snowflakes, reindeer, and even miniature barns. The molds are carved with precision, and pressing the dough into them requires just the right amount of pressure. Too much, and you're stuck chiseling dough out of the crevices too little, and the design won't hold. If you've ever struggled to get a cookie cutter out of sticky dough without ruining the shape, you'll appreciate the Amish process even more. They've mastered this art, making it look effortless. For pies, Amish bakers create lattice designs that would put Pinterest tutorials to shame. They use butter knives and their fingers to craft intricate patterns, all without a single stencil or ruler. Imagine the smell of cinnamon and nutmeg wafting through the kitchen, the soft hum of conversation as family members work side by side. There's flour dust in the air, laughter echoing as someone accidentally drops a piece of dough, and the satisfying thunk of a rolling pin hitting the counter. It's a scene straight out of a storybook. The shaping process isn't just about creating desserts, it's about creating memories. Step 4. Preparing for baking. Now comes the delicate part, getting everything ready for the oven. The Amish don't have fancy digital thermometers or convection ovens. Instead, they rely on wood-fired stoves and the hand test. What's the hand test? It's holding your hand near the oven door and gauging the heat based on how long you can stand it. A bit unconventional, but surprisingly effective. They line their baking sheets with parchment paper or sometimes leaves from their gardens. Yes, leaves. This adds a rustic touch and prevents sticking. At this stage, everything is ready to go into the oven, but this is where the Amish patience shines. Baking isn't just about setting a timer, it's about watching, smelling, and listening. The sizzle of butter hitting the pan, the slight browning of crust edges, it's all part of the experience. If you're the type who checks the oven 15 times in 20 minutes, you'd fit right in with the Amish. They're experts at peeking into the oven without letting all the heat escape. Think of it as an art form perfected over decades. Gathering. The journey begins in their gardens, barns, and cellars, where the freshest ingredients are lovingly prepared. While most of us drive to the nearest grocery store and load up on pre-packaged goods, the Amish take a more hands-on approach that's as wholesome as it is labor-intensive. Let's start with eggs. Forget carton convenience. Amish families gather them straight from the co-op. Picture a teenager cautiously reaching under a plump, slightly annoyed hen while being clucked at like they're stealing gold. The humor? Every beginner inevitably gets pecked at least once. Next comes the butter. Unlike the convenient sticks found in supermarkets, the Amish churn their own butter. This involves pouring fresh cream into a hand-cranked churn and turning it for what feels like hours. It's an arm workout that makes CrossFit look easy. And when the butter finally separates, there's a collective cheer. It's a victory worth celebrating. For sweeteners, they rely on homemade molasses, maple syrup, or honey harvested from their own beehives. If you've ever watched someone tend bees without modern gear, you know it's a brave endeavor. Imagine dodging an airborne army while calmly extracting liquid gold. It's not for the faint of heart. Think of gathering Amish ingredients like preparing for a family camping trip. Everyone is assigned a task, whether it's milking the cows or peeling apples. There's camaraderie, but also a touch of chaos. Someone always drops a bucket or forgets an essential tool. Once the ingredients are gathered, it's time to clean and prepare them. But the Amish don't have electric peelers or food processors. For apples, they use an antique hand-crank peeler that doubles as a conversation starter. Watching it in action is like witnessing a mechanical marvel from another era. The flour, often milled from their own wheat, is sifted by hand using a fine mesh sieve. This ensures a smooth texture for their baked goods. Fun fact, sifting flour can become a meditative exercise with rhythmic motions that soothe the soul until someone sneezes and sends a cloud of flour everywhere. Did you know that Amish communities often mill their flour in large batches, storing it in giant barrels? It's their version of bulk shopping, except with a rustic twist. Here's a tip: don't underestimate the Amish commitment to detail. If a single apple slice doesn't meet their standard, it's destined for the compost. And if you're ever invited to help with prep work, pace yourself. Amish kitchens operate like well-oiled machines, the same dedication multiplied tenfold. While most of us cheat with pre-made pie crusts or boxed mixes, the Amish revel in the authenticity of doing everything by hand. Mistakes to avoid. Want to try this at home? Beware of these common pitfalls. Using cold butter, Amish bakers know that room temperature butter blends better, so plan ahead. Rushing the process, patience is key. Skipping steps or cutting corners can lead to flat dough or unbalanced flavors. Over mixing, they mix just enough to combine ingredients, no overzealous stirring allowed. Mixing the ingredients the Amish way. With all the ingredients prepped and ready, it's time to bring them together. Unlike modern kitchens buzzing with electric mixers and food processors, Amish kitchens rely on muscle power and time-tested tools. Picture a large wooden mixing bowl, big enough to double as a baby's bathtub, and a sturdy wooden spoon that could probably fend off a bear. The butter, sugar, and sweeteners are creamed together by hand, a process that's as much a test of endurance as it is of skill. It's not uncommon for multiple family members to take turns, passing the spoon like a relay baton. The key is to mix until the butter and sugar become a fluffy, cloud-like consistency. Fun fact, the Amish believe the longer you cream, the better the flavor. Imagine stirring a pot of wet cement, but instead of building a driveway, you're crafting the foundation for something sweet and magical. Now comes the delicate dance of combining the dry ingredients with the wet. The flour is added gradually, sifted in one scoop at a time to avoid lumps. There's a special rhythm to this process: sift, fold, stir, repeat. Did you know that Amish families often trade or grow their own spices? It's a tradition that dates back generations and ensures the freshest flavors. Once the dough is mixed, it's time to shape it into its final form. Here's where the Amish's ingenuity shines. Instead of cookie cutters or pie tins from a store, they use handmade wooden molds or carve shapes with simple tools. For pies, the crust is rolled out with a wooden rolling pin that's likely been passed down through the family. The edges are crimped using nothing more than fingers or the tines of a fork. Cakes are baked in cast iron pans, adding a rustic charm to the finished product. For cookies, they often use carved wooden stamps to press intricate patterns into the dough. Each stamp tells a story, from stars and trees to symbols of faith and family. It's art you can eat. If you've ever tried making cookies with kids, you know how chaotic it can get: flour everywhere, dough sneaked into mouths instead of onto trays. Now imagine a calm, orderly Amish kitchen where even the youngest family members know their role. It's like a symphony, with each person contributing to the harmony. Another hallmark of Amish baking is their commitment to zero waste. Scraps of dough are re-rolled and used until the last bit is gone. Leftover pie crust becomes cinnamon sugar pinwheels, while extra filling is turned into mini tarts. This frugality ensures nothing is wasted, a lesson we could all take to heart during the holidays. Mistakes to avoid: overworking the dough. Unlike the Amish, who instinctively stop when the dough reaches the perfect consistency, many overdo it, leading to tough cookies or crusts. Skipping seasoning: the Amish understand that spices are the soul of holiday desserts. Don't skimp on them. Using uneven heat, cast iron is their secret weapon for consistent baking, so avoid flimsy pans if you want authentic results. Fun fact: the baking process. The Amish bake everything in wood-fired ovens or old-fashioned stoves. This requires skill and intuition, as there's no thermostat to regulate the temperature. They test the heat by placing their hand inside the oven or by observing how quickly a piece of bread browns. Think of their ovens as ancient dragons, temperamental and unpredictable, but capable of producing treasures when handled with care. With the dough prepared and the shapes formed, the desserts are ready to face the fire, literally. In the next part of the process, the focus shifts to baking, decorating, and of course, enjoying these masterpieces. Testing readiness the Amish way. Once the dough is mixed and shaped, the Amish take a hands-on approach to ensure everything is just right before baking. Since they don't rely on timers or high-tech gadgets, their methods are intuitive and based on experience. For instance, they'll poke a pie crust with a fork to test its elasticity or press a cookie dough ball with their fingers to feel the texture. Here's a delightful quirk: Amish bakers often rely on their senses. They can tell if the dough is ready just by the sound it makes while stirring. Yes, dough talks well in its own way. Imagine playing a tune on an old piano. The notes must harmonize perfectly to produce music. Similarly, the dough must have just the right consistency to ensure the final product hits all the right notes. Since Amish kitchens use wood-fired ovens, managing the baking temperature requires artistry. There are no digital dials, so they rely on time-honored tricks. For example, to gauge the oven's heat, they might toss in a pinch of flour if it browns too quickly. The oven is too hot. Another technique involves the use of test cookies. These are small dough portions baked first to check if the oven is at the right temperature. It's a clever way to ensure the entire batch comes out perfect. If you've ever burned cookies in a modern oven despite having a thermostat, you'll marvel at the Amish, who achieve perfection without one. Their wood-fired ovens are the original multitaskers, doubling as heaters during cold winters and sometimes even doubling as drying racks for herbs. Amish bakers pay close attention to timing, but it's not about minutes on a clock, it's about feel and observation. Pies are ready when the crust turns golden brown and the filling bubbles slightly at the edges. Cakes are tested using the old toothpick trick, except they often use a straw from a nearby broom. For cookies, they go by smell. The kitchen fills with the scent of spices, sugar, and butter, signaling it's time to check the oven. Did you know? The Amish sometimes use a straw from a broom as a makeshift skewer. It's an eco-friendly, ingenious solution that aligns with their sustainable lifestyle. For advanced recipes like layered cakes or braided breads, the dough requires extra care. Layering involves rolling the dough repeatedly, sometimes with butter between layers, to create a flaky texture. Braiding is a precise art: too tight, and the bread won't rise properly; too loose, and it falls apart. If you adjusting for perfection Amish style. Now that the Amish have their dough ready, it's time to move on to the more advanced steps of the baking process. This is where the real artistry shines through, showcasing their deep knowledge of flavors, textures, and the seasonal requirements of their desserts. Let's continue the journey through the magic of Amish baking. Handling the dough at this stage is like a dance, one part science, one part intuition. The Amish have mastered the art of stretching, rolling, and shaping their dough to perfection without resorting to modern tools. Whether it's a braided bread or flaky pastry, their techniques ensure a consistent outcome every time. Imagine working with dough that's as pliable and forgiving as a blanket of soft snow. The Amish press, pull, and shape it with their hands, feeling the dough's texture to judge its readiness. They fold, twist, and braid dough in a rhythm that's soothing to watch, almost as if the dough itself knows what it wants to be. Think of it like sculpting. Each movement with the dough is a precise stroke, turning a simple ingredient into a work of art. Just as a potter molds clay, the Amish mold dough. It's about perfecting it. One of their well-kept secrets is the incorporation of natural flavor enhancers. Take, for instance, their use of local ingredients like apples, honey, or even the maple syrup they tap from their trees. These aren't just sweeteners, they're flavor catalysts, adding depth and nuance to the baked goods. For instance, a traditional Amish fruitcake is soaked with apple cider, giving it a moist, tender crumb and a hint of sweetness. Or consider the gingerbread. Just the right amount of molasses and fresh ginger create a depth of flavor that's rich without being overpowering. This layering of flavors is a mark of Amish craftsmanship. You know you're in an Amish kitchen when a wooden spoon suddenly gets swapped for a stick of cinnamon as a makeshift stirring implement. The simplicity and resourcefulness are part of the charm. Before pulling a pie from the oven, Amish bakers will perform what they call the toothpick test, not for sweetness this time, but for consistency. They insert a toothpick into the center of the pie, and it should come out clean, with no sticky bits attached. This step ensures the Amish are musical with their food, making sure every note of the recipe is harmonious. Their fine-tuning is like a musician making tiny adjustments to a piece to bring out its full potential. One Amish grandmother shared, "If the pie cracks, just cover it with a dusting of powdered sugar. No one will ever know the Amish are masters of making mistakes. Seem like deliberate design choices. Rustic becomes charmingly homemade. Avoid over mixing dough. Amish bakers believe this can make baked goods tough. They mix by hand, knowing that the warmth of their hands helps the ingredients come together smoothly. Use fresh, local ingredients. The Amish place great importance on quality. Fresh milk, eggs, and flour are non-negotiable. A good quality butter can make the difference between an ordinary pastry and an extraordinary one. Patience. Everything in Amish baking takes time, and they embrace this. Baking is not a rush job, it's an experience. Patience ensures layers of flavor at a perfect texture every time. Sorghum syrup is a staple in Amish baking, adding a rich, earthy sweetness. It's harvested in the fall and cooked into syrup right in the community, providing a sweetener with a local touch. Maple syrup from their own trees is used not only for flavoring but also as a natural preservative in fruitcakes and breads. It's a versatile ingredient that symbolizes their self-sufficiency. Homemade vanilla extract is another beloved ingredient. They soak vanilla beans in bourbon or rum, making their extract that much more special. Rushing the dough. Amish bakers mix and knead until the dough is smooth but not overworked. Rushing this can lead to tough pastries. Using pre-ground spices, freshly ground spices have a fuller, richer flavor, which is key in Amish desserts. It's worth the extra step to grind them yourself. Skipping the resting time, letting dough rest before baking ensures a better rise and a more tender finished product. With these advanced steps mastered, the final part of Amish baking is all about presentation. From intricate designs on a fruitcake to a neatly braided bread, every step in Amish baking adds up to more than just a dessert. It's a story, a piece of tradition. Joy of creating something from scratch. Here's a quick recap of what we've learned. From milking cows for the freshest milk to using hand-cranked butter churns, the Amish approach to baking is steeped in tradition. We've explored the humble beginnings of the baking process, kneading dough by hand, making do without a fancy mixer, and relying on the warmth of a wood stove. Each step is deliberate, each ingredient has a purpose, and every technique has a story behind it. We learned about the importance of patience, not just for the dough to rise, but also itself, the rhythm of the kitchen, the satisfaction of shaping a perfect loaf, and the simple pleasure of sharing homemade treats with loved ones. Now, here's your challenge next time you're in the kitchen. Try your hand at baking something the Amish way. Even if you don't have access to all their tools like a wood stove or a hand-cranked butter churn, you can still capture the essence of their methods. Share your experience with friends and family and see how they react to your efforts. Who knows, you might spark a new tradition in your own home. Sweetened apple surprise? That's the kind of charming resourcefulness that makes Amish baking so delightful. Life's not perfect, and neither is baking, but in the Amish kitchen, every mistake becomes an opportunity for something new and delicious. So whether you're serving up a slice of homemade fruitcake or a batch of molasses cookies, you're not just enjoying a sweet treat. You're tasting a piece of history, a story of a community that values simplicity, self-sufficiency, and the joy of baking by hand. As you continue to explore the world of baking, take a leaf out of the Amish book, be patient, use what you have, and savor the simple joys of creating something from scratch. It's not just about the final product, it's about the love, the time, and the tradition that goes into it. And who knows, maybe someday your family will be telling their own unsweetened apple surprise stories, sharing the lessons they learned from your Amish-inspired baking adventures. Now, go on, dust off that old wooden spoon, roll up your sleeves, and whip up some Amish-inspired Christmas desserts. Whether it's a fruitcake, a batch of molasses cookies, or a freshly baked bread, every bite will be a sweet reminder of a simpler, more delicious time. Remember, baking without modern tools isn't just a way to make delicious treats, it's a way to connect with the past and keep those simple, joyful traditions alive. Happy baking!